America, and the report by Mr. Lange, non-application of custom duties on imports of certain goods. I would like to remind speakers that given the test measures currently in place and the fixed end time of the debate, strict observance of speaking times will be required. First place is going to be my speaker, Mr. Lange, as reporter.
Ja, herzlichen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender, Herr Kommissar.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Here we are the day before the vote on the EU's input into the implementation of the Scotland deal. Now, there are many implications to this, and amongst other things, it's quite clear that a handshake or a joint statement are certainly not going to be enough to keep the ship afloat. We need clear guidelines, we need clear legislation underpinning it. And therefore, colleagues, I'm extremely proud that we in the European Parliament have come together with the Council and have crafted some legislation democratically to forge a path ahead. Others have obviously forgotten the democratic traditions that we have in this European Union, democratic traditions which are forged by those who are elected by the people to this Parliament. And there are very important consequences which flow from this. These decisions, of course, are legally watertight, and that is extremely important. That is a critical factor at the moment when we recognise that what we are doing has got to be legally watertight, effective and cogent. And this is why we lay such great store by the rule of law and watertight legislation. There are those who have said, oh yes, well, but you've been far too dilatory and delayed. Well, the reality is that in October, the Commission sent to us a proposal on which we actually voted as soon as January. Then, of course, yes, there have been delays in the interim, but these are not delays which can be attributed to us or for which we can be held responsible. They are precisely to be attributed to the US because of the Greenland saga, with which we're all familiar when they threatened to annex Greenland and threatened ridiculous tariffs and were engaged in completely coercive behaviour. But then also, of course, fortunately, the court has actually declared that that declaration of tariffs was actually not legally watertight. It was null and void. And therefore, these are factors which have actually delayed the proceedings. I would now like to thank all the rapporteurs and shadows and everybody who's been involved in sticking fast to our course of action, in standing up for our citizens, our industry and our workers, because we are on the brink of delivering a very good result. This is going to be legislation which is based on the 5 S's, which are so critical, and they're going to constitute valuable safeguards which will enable us to be sure that this legislation is watertight. There is a sunset clause, it is legally compliant, and we are sure that this is legislation which can be reviewed, which can be updated. There are suspension clauses which can be invoked if necessary, and if there is divergence from the principles, and if unilateral tariffs are introduced. Therefore, we've got some crystal clear principles set down here. We have also looked at, for example, things such as steel derivatives. I don't know why washing machine is actually a steel derivative, but leaving that aside, we had to deal with that too. And this is all something which the Parliament has worked hard on, and the Parliament will remain extremely committed to and vigilant regarding all the developments flowing from this legislation. So, colleagues, I would ask you please tomorrow to vote for this legislation, which has been hard fought for. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais faire attention à mon temps de parole, je vous promets.
Thank you, President. I'll make sure I'm brief. Well, at this time last year, transatlantic relations, we're seeing major tensions. European businesses were facing a very volatile and uncertain climate, a lack of predictability, particularly when it came to tariffs and customs duties. Now, a year later, subsequent to the Turnberry Agreement, in spite of tensions, the situation has improved. There are still challenges, but we currently have a platform where we can hold exchanges with our main partner. The agreement, the joint EU-US agreement, which aims to restore predictability for businesses and consumers, is something that's useful so that we can continue working with our partner, stabilize the situation and deepen our efforts towards mutual understanding, and also our efforts to improve the situation of EU exporters vis-à-vis the US market. The Commission would like to thank the Parliament, and particularly Mr. Lange, for your commitment to ensuring that this agreement is adhered to, as it were, for ensuring that we can stick to what we said we'd do, honour our commitments. And I apologise on behalf of the Commissioner responsible who couldn't be here. But the results of the trialogue from the 20th of May is a solid one. This obviously relates to the European Union side, and now we have to expect a reciprocal commitment from the US side. I welcome the fact that the Intercommittee has firmly and clearly adopted these two legislative acts. The vote here is an important step. It means that we can move forward and boost our position and move towards a solid commitment vis-à-vis the US. Now, there are several priorities to look at. We need to ensure that the US respects the terms of the agreement when it comes to tariffs for EU exporters, and also when it comes to products derived from steel and aluminium. Now, we've already seen significant improvements thanks to the 2nd of June review. We will continue to push forward and ensure that we put pressure on to ensure that all of this is properly implemented, and we are grateful that we have the Parliament at the side of the Commission when it comes to implementing this agreement. Thank you.
Speaker is Madame Ludova from the Committee of Budget.
Donald Trump jako hasič.
Donald Trump is like a firefighter who starts the fire. First he attacks Iran and then says that it is a historic accomplishment to achieve an agreement that Hormuz has been reopened, Hormuz that had worked from the time of Babylon. Great job, Mr. President. Tariffs, the same thing. First you start an economic crisis, then the American consumers pay for it, then you partly save it. Don't get me wrong. The EU and US deal has my support. We need stable conditions, but it is not a triumph of diplomacy, rather. It is cleaning up somebody else's mess, and that somebody will continue sitting in the White House for the next 2.5 years.
De Presupuestos, la señora Gómez López.
From the Budgets Committee as well, Mrs. Gómez López. Thank you very much. Thank you, President. Allow me to start by commending my colleague, Mr. Lange. Thank you so much for all the hard work during this whole process. You know, to begin with, we had something very unbalanced in terms of tariffs. The Trump administration, which is disregarding international standards, but also disregarding its historic alliance with Europe. It's, you know, of course, a matter of common agreement that a trade war with the United States of America would not serve anyone's interests. Therefore, instead of accepting the agreement as it stands, we have been fighting hard to introduce provisions, safeguard clauses, in order to protect our companies and to protect Europe's interests, financial interests. Here in this European Parliament, we have played our role. 2026, 31st of December. We know that, unfortunately, we know that for steel and aluminium, 15% tariffs, and if that were still to be the case, we could actually suspend the agreement if it were to go any further. Therefore, Europe will not accept this kind of pressure. We're going to work hard in order to support our industry, and we shall stand firm. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gomez-Lopez.
Committee of Agri, Madame Bretsionova.
Thank you very much for the floor. I'm glad that we have managed to strike this deal. A trade war would not have been good for us or the US. It would benefit our global competitors, such as Russia or China. When you view it from the perspective of the farmers, it might seem to us as though they have been sidelined and that industry is getting preferential treatment, but that's not the reality. Trade agreements are not the main issue facing European agriculture. We create our own problems through excessive regulation and restrictions. That said, it is necessary to make sure that our standards are always maintained and that the high quality of our agricultural products is kept. Mutual trade ultimately creates well-being and prosperity for society as a whole and opens up new opportunities for farmers. Thank you.
Now we begin with the groups. In first place, on behalf of the EPP group, Madame Zovko.
Yes, Presidente. For decades, Europe and the United States have stood together as true brothers in arms. United by shared values, common sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to freedom and democracy. Today, in a world of growing geopolitical uncertainty and economic fragmentation, our transatlantic partnership must remain a source of strength. Strong alliances require trust, reciprocity, and a vision. Europe and America must continue to move forward together, not only as allies, but as partners shaping the future together. The transatlantic relationship is not only about economics. It's about values, jobs, strategic resilience, and our ability to act together in an increasingly competitive world. But today, our partnership is being tested not only by geopolitical challenges, but also by economic uncertainty. At a time when industries on both sides of the Atlantic are under pressure, thousands of jobs are at stake, and our citizens expect leadership and responsibility. This is why I call for approval of this deal, not simply as an economic agreement, but as a strategic decision that protects jobs, strengthens our industries, and reinforces the transatlantic partnership that has guaranteed prosperity for generations. True allies stand together not only in times of conflict, but also when the future of their economy and workers is online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Zovko. Muchas gracias. Mr. Benifei from the Socialists and Democrats group.
Tomorrow, the European Parliament is giving its support because we believe it's necessary to take a step forward, stabilizing transatlantic trade relations between EU and US, supporting our businesses, protecting jobs, and creating greater economic predictability. But let there be no misunderstanding. Our approval is only subject to conditions that we clearly outlined and obtained in the legal texts that we vote on tomorrow. We have asserted our institutional role and we have empowered the Commission with the tools needed to protect European interests, with safeguards and suspension clauses that strengthen our ability to respond if the commitments undertaken are not respected. We now expect them to be used with determination whenever necessary, and rest reassured we will stay vigilant. We have also set a clear end term to this agreement because open and free trade, not tariffs, should be the norm in our trade relationship. Our vote is intended to help rebuild trust, but trust must be earned through credibility, consistency, and mutual respect. That is why we now count on concrete progress from the United States on key pending issues, starting with resolving the unacceptable asymmetry on steel and its derivatives. With this vote, we are doing our part, and with the clarity that has too often been absent from some of our governments, we stated clearly Europe needs a strong transatlantic partnership based on reciprocity and mutual convenience. Anything less would not serve the long-term interests of European citizens, which must remain our guiding concern.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. My next speaker on behalf of the Patriots for Europe group is Monsieur Mariani.
Cet accord commercial avec les États-Unis.
This trade agreement with the US is not a diplomatic success. Let me tell you what it actually is. For me, it's a shameful capitulation. The only side that wins is the United States. They maintain 50% of their duties on our steel, aluminium, machines, electro equipment, our medicines see increased rates. What have we got in exchange? Well, we got rid of our duties on US industrial goods. We promised that we would buy billions of US energy, etc. So where's the reciprocity here? What you can see here is that one single sector on the European side has been spared, and that's the German car industry. And the US are basically the big winners. Machinery, spirits, pharmaceuticals, everything's under threat now. We have undermined the entire European economy to save one single sector. The European Union was built as an open market, and we're now garnering the results of this disarmament. You call it an open market, I call it being trampled on. Commissioner, if I understood correctly, you 3 times mentioned the fact that what's important is predictability. I mean, the only thing that's predictable is that next time Mr. Trump stands up and threatens us, we'll give in again, because giving in inevitably leads to more demands.
Your group, Mr. Van der.
President, Commissioner, first of all, I would like to extend my thanks to everybody who was involved in the trilogue. Colleagues, let me be clear. Trade with our most important strategic and economic partner is very important, but trading is not the same as utter naivety. And here we have got to consider whether this agreement is going to strengthen our industry, our employees' position, the competitiveness, and our open strategic autonomy. In uncertain times, it's very important that we come up with a feasible, workable compromise predicated on stability, predictability, and legal certainty. Escalating tensions and confrontation is in nobody's interest, and this is why clear guarantees which enable us to take prompt action and respond effectively in cases of threat must be protected. Colleagues, this is not the end of the road. We have got to continue our commitment to dialogue with the US. This is only one step along the path. Thank you.
Herr talman.
President, dear colleagues, you've just got a new neighbour. Now, your new neighbour is unreliable, doesn't behave very nicely, threatens you. Now, you had a neighbour before then. Over the last year, you really were able to foster a good relationship. You helped each other out. You both benefited from that. But now you have next door a new neighbour with whom you don't get on at all. What do you do? What do you do? I'm actually proud of what we have achieved together. We've been able to stand up to the pressure and the blackmail exerted by Trump, and we haven't forgotten Greenland, for one thing. We have also built a basis for stability in our transatlantic trade. In the meantime, of course, Trump is causing chaos. So through this agreement, we are, I think, protecting ourselves against new threats. This is really helpful. It's not the last debate that we're having on trade with the USA, but at least we'll be able to escape the worst, and I think that that is definitely in Europe's interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Karlsruhe. On behalf of the Greens, Madame Cavazzini, la señora.
Yeah, dear colleagues, dear Commissioner, eines ist klar, Trump's...
One thing is clear, Trump's tariffs are illegal and this deal shouldn't exist. Last year, we should have been stronger as the European Union. We should have been more self-confident. Where were the counter tariffs? Where was the activation of the anti-dumping instrument, etc.? We should have been tougher, but we weren't. It's also extremely bad that the European Union has come up with this statement on the imports of LNG. I mean, our failures really have been very poor. We cannot make ourselves dependent on fossil fuel producers from the United States. Now, onto the deal. It's bad that we have to have it, but given the situation, I think it is good to try and get some kind of stability vis-à-vis Trump. The Parliament has achieved improvements. The European Union can be tougher if Trump doesn't stick to the deal. But, colleagues, what's important is that the Commission use this lever if Trump doesn't stick to the deal. It was extremely important for us in trilogue to get that in, and we hope that the Commission sticks to its commitments on this. In addition, we need to use the time that we currently have to use that time to do our homework as the European Union. We need to move away from our dependence on the US when it comes to fossil fuels and AI and computing.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. Donald Trump is practicing extortion and engaged in a trade war with us. He's threatened to annex Greenland. He has anti-democratic regime change plans. He has embarked on illegal wars, and the European Union is suffering from this. Our employees are suffering from it, and Ursula von der Leyen has signed up to a bad deal. After all the discussion and the votes in the committee, the European Union is still going to be under the threat of all kinds of capricious tariffs. For example, they can invoke arguments such as forced labour, and they can do other things which are simply going to make a mockery out of this agreement that we have reached. In the meantime, of course, people in the steel industry have already lost jobs, and they're very worried across the industry. Yet here, the Parliament is simply giving away all its negotiating chips and is not implementing any of the anti-coercion measures which we actually could invoke against Trump, who has absolutely been practicing coercion. I'm glad that my group has decided to stand up against these autocrats and this unfair trade policy. We stand for jobs and for independence from the USA. Thank you.
Very much. On behalf of the ESN Group, Mr. Sivniewski.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. On the one hand, we've got the EU. On the other hand, the United States. It's difficult to talk about equilibrium because we have gotten rid of all the arguments. The more powerful dictates their stance to the weaker, and Europe is the weaker partner because the US is now fully controlling global energy interest. And Europe has lost energy sovereignty. We are dependent. We have to import energy sources, and this crazy situation is going to go on. Look at this. The World Cup in 1994 took place in the US, and then all those who are great in football adjusted to Europe. We could watch matches at normal European hours, and now we have to adjust, and the same goes for trade. Europe doesn't matter as much, and we see it during the negotiations. In order to gain respect and have a position of power, you need to act wisely. And today, Europe is just an open-air museum. We have to get rid of the Green Deal, and only then we will be able to negotiate better agreements.
Part of the debate, the Commission can ask for the floor at any moment. Mr. Warborn, you have the floor.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. The deal that was struck almost a year ago, it is not perfect, let us be honest about that. But this is the best deal we can get at the moment, and we urgently need it. Businesses urgently need it. This is not about being pro-Trump or not. This is about being pro-European businesses and for more stability in the relationship, the trade relationship that matters to every worker and every consumer. For more than a year, European companies have asked for one thing: clarity on the transatlantic trade relationship. And with this vote, the EU delivers on its part of the deal. We avoid a trade deal, and we give the industry more predictability to invest and to grow and to create jobs. The agreement now has strong safeguards that holds the United States committed. Approving this file will let us move forward so that we can even deepen the trade relationship with the US. Europe wins when Europe trades. So let's vote yes to this deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague, Madame Van Bremt.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. And hi, Commissioner. Good that you're here. Ever since Donald Trump returned to the White House and launched his trade war, the European Union has been playing defense. Tariff after tariff and threat after threat. The Commission did not have a plan. It repeatedly failed to build credible leverage. The result, as we know, was a bad, unbalanced Thornberry deal. That's why the S&D Group refused to simply rubber stamp it. But we also don't want a trade war. No. European workers and business, they need stability and no endless uncertainty. And so we decided not to choose between a trade war or submission. We chose to fight for a better deal, and we delivered. Thanks to the S&D Group and our chief negotiator and the chair of the INTA committee, this is now a temporary and conditional agreement and not a blank check. We made sure Europe has the tools, Commissioner, this is really important, that Europe has the tools to react to Trump's chaos. Because that's what was missing from the Commission's proposal. A credible plan for what happens when the US escalates again. And what did they do today? They say, well, they want 100% tariffs on French wine. There we go. We know, dear colleagues, it will happen. New threats, tariffs and coercion will come. We urge the Commission to take this deal and, if necessary, use the leverage that is in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Madame Bruka.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, the negotiations lasted almost a year. We remain critical of this agreement. This is a deal which is asymmetrical. There are too many concessions on the European part that concerns industry, but also agriculture. We are basically capitulating here, which is the result of the policy of the European Commission. There have been more rounds of negotiations. The text has been amended. Some of the demands that we have made, that the Parliament has made, have been taken into account. The agreement is now provisional. It can be suspended where a major economic injury occurs. But it is very problematic that there are more commitments in the package. Europe is to buy energy, military equipment. Europe is also required to invest in the United States. This is not favorable. The tariffs are not symmetrical. The problem of steel and aluminium remains unresolved, and there is no formal impact assessment. Europe and America, this is the 30% of global trade. This is very important, but it requires efficiency and courage. The Commission doesn't have either. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Il signore Polato.
Preservare l'unità. Preserving Euro-Atlantic unity and boosting the coordination between Europe and the US is essential. It's not easy, but it's something we have to do, and supporting these agreements moves in that direction. These are complex agreements, they're not perfect, but they're a good starting point. They're a signal that we can send out to give certainty to businesses on trade flows. There are people who criticize and judge these agreements, but let's not forget that things can be modified. We as the ECR are always open to dialogue, and let's remember that these agreements aren't an end in themselves. They're a start. They're something that we can base ourselves on, and during the coming months we will have more spaces where we can negotiate. Now, the Italian government has clearly stood up and said what it doesn't agree with tariffs, Greenland, Iran, and we will continue to do that. Those who want stability need to support these businesses, and we will continue to work hard in favour of our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, honourable members of the European Parliament. First and foremost, I want to thank my good colleague, Executive Vice President Sejourné, for kindly stepping in because I was delayed in the Foreign Affairs Council in Luxembourg. But what I heard from the discussion and what my close collaborator Sofia was explaining to me from the previous discussion, I would like to thank you first and foremost for what I feel will be broad support tomorrow for the proposals we put on the table. And I very much appreciate also very close collaboration which brought us to this point. I want to thank Chairman Lange. We spent a lot of hours together, sometimes in very lively atmosphere, sometimes in calm atmosphere, but what is very important that we find very important compromise, and I also want to thank to all shadows, most of them been intervening here today, Madame Zhovko, Mr. Warborn, Madame Carlsborough, Madame Cavazzini, Mr. Benifei, and if I can underline just 2-3 points in the remaining minute, I have first and foremost this step tomorrow is very important for signaling how important we take this biggest trade relationship in this world. And despite of all turbulence we went through the last year, let's not forget that our trade actually increased. Now it's more than $2 trillion for our mutual trade, and also investment went up. So now we're talking about $6 trillion of mutual investment on both sides of Atlantic, and millions of jobs and businesses which depend on making sure that we would work with our American partners in the best possible way, despite of all the volatilities. All of you have been highlighting the measures, the safeguards, and all the instruments which are built in the proposals as you propose them. Of course, we all know that we have to be vigilant, and I want to promise you that we will be. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you very much. Madam Boutmans.
Voorzitter, collega's.
President, colleagues. Take the deal and shut up was really Trump's message to Europe for months, and it was echoed by his entourage. And frankly, there were all too many people here within this House who actually thought the same. But now Europe has actually given an answer. It's not down on its knees, though. It's given some clear statements on clear conditions which it has set. Yes, we will engage with this deal, but it will be predicated on strategic autonomy. So thanks to this House, and thank you, Kathleen van Rem, you're saying it was thanks to the socialists. You have done a lot, but so has Renew Europe. We worked extremely hard as well. We all worked very hard, and we invested a huge amount to get guarantees, to get conditions, to improve the agreement. And it's now infinitely better than the initial agreement. It is actually much more worthy of the term partnership, and it should hopefully contribute towards a sustainable European partnership, not one that's based on threats and coercion. It should create certainty for industry and for our citizens. And it's also a clear message to Trump that, OK, we're accepting it this time, but next time we're fighting back. Thank you.
Well, let's be honest, nobody's cock-a-hoop about this agreement with the USA, but some are still holding their breath. Some hope that this will bring predictability for our businesses and that Trump will stick to the agreement, to the deal. But, you know, how much are these Trump promises worth? Bearing in mind he's already talked about retaliation against Europe, about tariffs. You know, it's not really serious business. We can't accept this without a guaranteed stability for our companies. We need proportionality. The European Parliament proposed proportionality, but the governments and the Commission completely dismantled that. Europe shouldn't accept submission, and it shouldn't accept a transactional logic, and certainly shouldn't just play along with the bullies. We don't want increased dependence on unstable partners. You know, quite the opposite. Europe actually has the keys to its own success, and that means economic, industrial and energy transition. That's what we actually need. Thank you very much, Mrs. Aubry. Commissioner, the European Union, is it now the 51st state of the United States of America? Because that's kind of the impression you're giving when you're rolling out the red carpet for Trump and when you're accepting a trade agreement which is completely asymmetrical, where Europe is being hoodwinked. European products, 15% tariffs for any goods coming into the EU. What about goods coming from the USA? 0% tariffs. Don't you think that's a little bit unbalanced? What about our farmers? Do they need this extra competition? Trump wants to threaten Greenland, supports genocide in Palestine, is encouraging far-right parties in Europe, and, you know, you're just like a doormat. So what about our European standards on the digital, on food? You know, there are some that the US president doesn't like. Trump is asking for everything. He's asking for everything and absolutely the world. Don't just let him do that. So I'm turning to all the political groups, all of you, across the board. You know, those of you who are going to be voting for this agreement, how long are you going to accept the fact that Europe is a vassal state of the United States of America? Come on, it's time to wake up.
From Mr. Stier from the EPP group, do you accept it? Mr. Stier, seat 672.
Thank you, President. Ms. Aubry, from your position, it seems that the left hates the US administration far more than it loves European workers or European citizens of the European businesses. Please explain to me what is the cost of not having an agreement that cannot be eventually perfect, but what will be the cost of not having an agreement with the US, and how the European workers will pay for that cost? Please.
Thanks for your question. It's quite interesting that EPP all of a sudden cares about European workers. You don't care so much about European workers when it's about killing or protection for European workers. When it comes to SMEs and companies, do you really think that a 50% rate for European products that enter the US market versus 0% for American products that enter the EU market will really favor our economy, will really favor our companies? I think there's a bit of economy that is lost there.
Merci, Madame. Mr. Andrus, you have the floor.
Colleagues, Mr. Commissioner, reducing customs duties for American products to 0, while we have to pay 15%, would be acceptable for some time if we also reduce our dependency on the use, but that's not happening. Now we're doing what the corporations want us to do. They say that they will accept these customs duties, but at the same time these corporations want us to support their competitiveness by reducing other costs, related to the people who work for them. Higher customs duties in the US, European corporations want to compensate these or for this by reducing social rights in Europe, by reducing their wages and so on. So let's support European export, but not by making sure that this money all goes to the profits of European companies. Instead, we should, for example, have a new regulation where we would have access to public orders in Europe or state aid only to those companies which respect trade unions, which give good wages to their employees, and that would be good. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you, President. 250 years ago, the US was born. But Washington and Jefferson were not alone. Together with them, there were thousands of Europeans, Bernardo Alves, the Marquis of Lafayette, 200 years later, we continue to work together, the US and Europeans. We've always been allies, partners and friends. We share history, values and a way of seeing the world, in spite of our disputes. And there's no tweet or tariff that can do away with all of that. Now, the agreement that we're about to ratify is not perfect, but it is necessary. There was too much at stake. Over 1.5 billion euros a year and 5 million jobs in Europe. So Europe has done its bit. We negotiated responsibly, and we have shown that we're a responsible partner. Now it's up to Washington. It's time for Washington to show that it looks to the future to another 250 years of the European-US alliance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Folks, let me be very clear from the outset. This deal is not perfect, but perfect was never on the table. The EU simply does not have the cards to force a better outcome. We negotiated from a position of weakness. And the real question is, how did we end up here? Because of years of misguided policies, suffocating bureaucracy, and an energy policy driven by ideology instead of common sense. That's why now we have a continent where businesses are no longer expanding, but leaving. So right now, our companies do not need political theater. They need certainty and predictability, so they can invest, compete, and create jobs. Voting against this deal may sound tough, but it means escalation, a trade war with the United States, and serious economic damage. And that is not the path my party will support. That's not a good deal, but at least it is the least bad option. That's why we choose realism, we choose for our businesses, and we choose for the Dutch economy. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter.
Mr. Kras, you have a blue card from Madame Vieira. Madame Vieira, from the Greens.
Yes, I like the Greens.
Do you accept it?
Yes, of course. It's a democracy.
Seat 55.
Colleague, you talk about certainty and predictability. With the US administration of Donald Trump, you think you can write on a deal what was going to happen, what will happen, and that he will follow by the rules because he follows by the rules? What kind of certainty and predictability are you giving businesses if today he threatened France with more taxes, with more tariffs on wine if they don't scrap their digital service tax? What certainty and predictability is my question to you?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Mrs. Vieira. But let me be very clear. What Trump understands is the power of competitiveness. And I understand that the left side of this parliament, we just heard that other left-wing didgeridoo, has nothing to do with enforcing competitiveness and enforcing jobs and our economic strength. So, yeah, don't ask me about how capitalism, how capitalism works, but yeah, if you would understand, then you would not be on the left side of politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kelleher.
This time last year, there was great uncertainty and volatility across Europe, and grave concern by workers and small and medium-sized businesses. And the Turnberry Agreement, while not perfect, certainly brought about stability in terms of at least giving confidence to business and workers that an agreement could be struck whereby we would play by certain rules. President Trump is volatile. He does make up policy on the hoof. But from a European perspective, we have to show that we're committed to signing up what we agreed and implementing it. I'd like to put on the record my deep appreciation to Karen Carlsborough, our Renew Shadow, for bringing a firm, fair perspective to the negotiations. And now, from now on, the European Union must show a very strong hand in ensuring that the United States lives up to its obligations under this particular agreement. So now, for the moment, it's over to you, President Trump, to honour your word, and we'll question you on that if you break it.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Serva.
Ta sprawa dotycząca
There is one thing. Everything to do with the implementation of the provisions of the agreement between EU and US is of key importance for transatlantic relations. from the political viewpoint, but also when it comes to security. And this is something we have to say very clearly. This is a necessary agreement and has full support because it guarantees the interests of European companies, European employees. It provides stability, predictability, and obviously strengthens greater economic cooperation. But obviously, if this does go through and we facilitate this, and I would assume it will do, there's a European Parliament giving us support, this will require further talks. And obviously, from Poland, we want to create the necessary infrastructure conditions. As the standing rapporteur from AFET, I would like to thank Mr. Lange for the work that you have done in order to arrive at this agreement, and you have our full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. My first speaker for the Catch the Eye time is Madame Grappini, seat 543.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte, domnule comisar, stimați colegi.
Thank you.
Много благодаря, скъпи колеги. Наистина това е един необходим договор, разбира се.
It may be a temporary agreement, but I think Mr. Lange and his team have managed to improve this agreement. So the provisional agreement is good, but let's go further. Let's make sure that Mr. Trump respects his promises, but let's not ignore the fact that a market like the US market is a very important one. And so we also need to look at the security side of things. You know, you don't want to pay tariffs to 50% and then the counterpart be zero tariffs. So we need to see this as a whole, the market as a whole, security as a whole, and also keep a close watching brief on whether his promises are being kept. Otherwise, Commissioner, you'll have to step in because we cannot allow this agreement to be ignored. Thank you.
Very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Tynkkynen, seat 210, please.
Madam President, Antifa, Greenpeace, pro-Palestine networks. Although the left would wish otherwise, none of these is the EU's most important partner. What is then? It is the United States of America, unlike the left would wish. I have a message to the leftists in this chamber. You are free to hate Trump. I see also you hate the politicians in Europe who don't want our countries to be invaded by illegal migration. But do me a favor, don't hate Europe. Because when you demand the dismantling of the partnership between the US and Europe, you actively want Europe to become less prosperous and less safe. Your anti-Trump rhetoric isn't making us stronger. Your new climate goals are not making us stronger. Your new taxes are not making us stronger. What will make us stronger is the transatlantic partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next is Ms. Vieira, seat 55, please.
Tomorrow we vote on a deeply unequal deal. A deal to prevent the worst, even though the worst was deemed illegal by the US Supreme Court. A deal so we know what to expect, even though since it has been struck, the US has already increased its tariffs on steel and aluminium and today threatened France with more. A deal to get certainty and predictability from the same US administration that has threatened to invade Greenland, abducted a head of state, and brought the world economy to its knees by starting a war with Iran. From an administration that is violating human rights at home and abroad and sanctioning the international courts. The US trade policy isn't about stability, it's about deregulation. It's about more real estate deals for the Trump family, and it's about lining the pockets of billionaires. They use trade as blackmail to get what they want around the world. This parliament has fought hard to improve the deal, and they secured many improvements. But no amount of safeguards will change the fact that Europe should not let itself be blackmailed by a dangerous autocrat.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker in Catch the Eye is Ms. Matthews, seat 31, please.
Госпожа Матюс, заповядайте. Благодаря. Да, наистина, вече е ясно какво ще се случи след така нареченото търговско споразумение по думи.
Stability. Well, because of course, with this guy, you already always know what to expect, right? Remember the 15% tariffs. Remember the threats that he posed against Greenland. The only thing that we really know for sure is that there is no credibility and no certainty when it comes to the commitments of President Trump. So we have to fix our own house. We need to make sure that we complete our internal market, because then we actually give our companies a home market bigger than the US. We need to make sure that we have a real European capitals market, so our savings go into European companies instead of to Wall Street. And we need massive investment in the greening of our industry, so Trump can't blackmail us anymore with fossil fuel. So guess what? All of those things we can do without Trump's signature. We don't need to give him a birthday present. We need to grow.
Подписа да имаме съгласието на Трамп. Благодаря. Благодаря.
I made a mistake. I have two further speakers on Catch the Eye, and the next one is Mr. Perez, seat 774, please.
Olvidarse de mi presidente, gracias.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, your own Vice President, Mr. Shishone, has said today that 300 billion euros are going from Europe to more attractive markets, and that's why we need to sign this kind of agreement. Have we asked who's leaving? Maybe they're fleeing from the taxes, the legal uncertainty that we've been calling out for a long time. 3 months ago, we were told that energy prices were unbearable. Following what policy? That of China or the Commission? We're told that China and US have been making us dependent, but the answer seems to be more European preference, more European rules, more Brussels, basically. If the problem is an excess of Brussels, can the solution really be more Brussels? I don't think we can solve this by making more laws. Thank you.
And now the last one is Ms. Ivanovici-Sosuaka, seat 860, please.
Mulțumesc.
Yes, thank you, President. I have attended the debate, and I think this is a useful debate for the Americans. Obviously, this is a debate that's being broadcast directly. I think Europe seems to be lacking experts in the most important posts. You don't really understand the economy properly. I am a commercial lawyer. I've negotiated a lot of contracts, and what I can say is that you should never show weakness. You should only show yourself to be strong, and it isn't the case for Europe, because you're always going on about Trump and Putin and Xi Jinping, but they're the ones doing the business and destroying the European Union. A week ago, I attended the St. Petersburg Forum in Russia, and I can tell you that there was a large American delegation, and they signed contracts for tens of billions of dollars with the Russians. And
on speaking time with the new format. And now I will give the floor back to the rapporteur. Bernd Lange, please, the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, dear Commissioner, now we are concluding the debate, and I thought which rock song could be the best for concluding this debate. First, I thought from the Doors, this is the end, my beautiful friend. But I think that's not the right one. The right one is from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, From the Beginning. Because we are starting now with a legal text where the European Parliament is guaranteed to the citizens, I guess, at least 5 points. First, we will be not blackmailed. That's for sure. That's in this text guaranteed. We will stick to a rule-based order and guarantee that the power is not determining our democratic decision. Thirdly, the EP is a democratic force, and it will guarantee that we will influence the policy of the European Commission. And if the US will not stick to this commitment, it's clear that with this legal text, we can and we will react. And it's totally clear that the European Parliament has really clearly strengthened and improved the proposal by the Commission. And there was a big pressure from outside the European Parliament, from the other side of the Atlantic, sometimes even from inside the European bodies, but we resist. And I'm really proud, dear colleagues, that we really reached this agreement, this legislation, so that we can really have these 5 guarantees to our citizens. So let's vote in favor tomorrow to this legislation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for that. And the joint debate is closed, and the vote will be held tomorrow, as the rapporteur just said. And thank you for your patience. So now we will move to the next debate. However, I can see that our rapporteurs are not here yet.